of those days when you're trying to find something to paint and you just can't find something that inspires you? Well, I came down to Chelsea Embankment to paint houseboats because I wanted to paint colour, and it's pretty dull actually. So what I do in those circumstances, I half close my eyes on the view and I look for a strong tonal balance, because painting likes tone. And in this instance, the dark boats, the light water, and then the distant mid-tone gives me a composition. And then a man came out on the boat and gave me a little bit of movement. That's my composition. I'm so happy to be out of the wind, and I'm also happy that my photograph has come up with a bit more lift than I felt in the view. But the main thing is this tonal balance, the dark, the light and the mid-tone. There's quite a dramatic sky going on behind this view, so I'm going to dampen my sky area just so I can pick up some of the white clouds, some of the undershadows. I obviously managed to get better photographs than I felt at the time because there's more light in this image, more resonance of colour. Sometimes when you print your photographs you get more colour anyway. I'm going to use yellow ochre just to lighten the horizon level, just to give that lift, and across the front of that barge. Because although in the photograph I don't see it, I remember there being this sort of warmth at the horizon. I'm using Prussian blue and leaving out some of the tops of the clouds, trying to use the heel of the brush just to create a little edge. Coming across the dark side of the tower and bringing more colour, more paint around the light side so that I've got a nice contrast of tone. Remember that light tone in the distance, light tone on the water reflecting the sky, and the mid-tone of the buildings at the back and the dark tone of the boats in the foreground. And while the sky is still wet, just dropping in a little bit of, I think, a bit of permanent rose in, just to catch that grey, mauvey colour. What yellow am I going to use? I'm going to use yellow ochre and possibly a bit of aureolin. Oh, I don't know, actually. I think the sky is sort of, the paint I add in mustn't be too wet or it'll create backgrounds. So this is just a little bit into the underside of those clouds, just to catch that feeling of their three dimension. I'm using a size 8 brush in these wisps of cloud. Got to be careful, because what you don't want to do is put in damper colour and then cause backgrounds. I think I'm going to leave well alone now because the sky is drying very quickly. The water reflects the sky, so I'm going to bring the colour of the water, the lightest colour of the water, and remember how light that water was, in just after painting the sky. So I marry the two together so that one reflects the other. So yellow ochre here at the horizon, it can go across all these buildings, it can go across anywhere I don't want white paper retained, and then a nice pale wash, leaving out just anything that maintains a highlight. In fact, I don't want it to take the red. That's the one bit of colour I've got, is the red on the front of that barge. These dark posts that can go across those. And there's a nice little buoy here, There's a nice buoy in the water, which I can just leave out of this wash as I come down. I'm a great believer in getting my tonal values in as early as possible, because then you can work out your tonal balance. If you've got loads of areas of white paper, it's really hard to work out how dark your darks can be and how light your lights can be. So if you get your mid-tones in as early as possible, get your light tones in as early as possible, kill off that white paper, you'll be amazed how much easier it is to see what you're doing. And also, if you're actually working outside, the light changes, so you need to add information in early on. There's a lovely shadow being cast by the roof of this red barge, and I'm just going to bring that in quite strong now so that I've got that in there, because if that was happening for real, I'd have to note that then and there, because the chances are the sun would go in again and I'd lose that. And just run a little bit of red into that. Just picking up any old brush, this is a size 6, but just to drop that in now while the colour's wet. So it just keeps the colour blended together. So we've got our basic light tone in, the water reflecting the sky, and now that's given a chance for the horizon level to dry, and so we can bring in now the tone, the mid-tone of the buildings at the back. I'm using the Prussian blue, I'm using the size 8 brush, and I'm sticking with the round brush because this brush can create all those shapes, these fancy shapes of these new modern buildings. They're not all square. So look at this amazing roof on the top of there. And all these serve to come down and create the top light on top of the barge in the front, the red barge here in the foreground. So the bottom of these buildings, the bottom of the buildings that I'm painting, is the light on top of the barge in front. And a little bit of the red just dropped into some of these just to change their colour a bit. But remember, we couldn't really see it, so we mustn't get carried away and think, just because we've got a photograph now, that there's more information out there than there appeared to be at the time. Now we come up the Chelsea Tower, and it wasn't that dark out there. It was quite light in the distance, so I have to be careful not to follow the photograph too carefully and think that it's much darker tone than I could see. And you see how the tip of the sable really helps for getting this triangular shape. So we've got quite a big body in the brush and a lovely tip that can create the tiniest point. And I'm just dropping now a bit more tone in. This is a little bit of cadmium red added into the Prussian blue, just to catch that feeling of the pattern on this tower. All these floors are merely a shape of darks sort of in the light, because it's quite a distinct building. And it's got a little thing on top. Coming down now, I'm making sure I leave the light top of the barge out of the wash behind, and because I've got that little man who suddenly appeared, I'm going to also leave a little bit of light on top of his head so that he will exist in front of the background. Also, the prow is catching light, so I'm just leaving that out of the background and just letting run in the colour at the front of that prow at the same time, so that the colour blends a little bit with the background. Watercolour loves colours running together. And then these curious shaped buildings that I think are along the Putney, or maybe Battersea, yeah, Wandsworth, I think they're Wandsworth, by the Wandsworth Bridge. Curious, I mean, they look like, I don't know what they look like. You can tell each floor, they're just a shape for the brush. We're not creating buildings, we are creating shapes brushes. Letting the brush play around. And now this, is this dry? Because we want to come across there. Yep, it is dry. And in this mid-tone, there is again variations. Let's just get, oh actually I rather like the blue there. I think we just bring a little variation up here near the centre. That's rather nice, isn't it, the way it fades away over there. Follow your watercolour. If your watercolour's doing nice things, don't change it just because something different's happening out there in the real world or in the photograph. If your watercolour's got a nice wash, don't mess it up, don't overpaint it. You're creating a watercolour. You're not creating a view of Chelsea Reach,